Okay, so today we're going to dive into something a little bit heavy, a little bit intense.
Yeah.
We're talking about prepping for a wartime economy.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to look at practical steps,
Right. Yeah.
things you can actually do to prepare,
Mm-hmm.
but also the psychological side of things. How do you wrap your head around this
Right.
kind of scenario?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to use a bunch of different sources for this.
Okay.
We've got 7 ways to prep for a wartime economy. That's a good one. Gear up for survival, even how to prepare for nuclear war.
Wow. Covering all the bases.
Yeah, we're going there.
Okay.
But it's interesting because you see these different approaches. Like one source is really into stockpiling, like hoarding all the stuff.
Right.
And another one is all about like building those networks. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do those two things work together?
Yeah. That is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
It really highlights how complex this whole scenario is.
Exactly. And 7 ways to prep for a wartime economy. They don't sugarcoat it. When it comes to the economic side of things, they point out how Russia's exports, things like wheat oil, natural gas, even metals,
Right.
could be really hit hard by sanctions. And we're not just talking about Russia here.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about global ripple effects.
Yeah. When you think about a wartime economy,
Right.
what it really means is a nation shifting from producing consumer goods to focusing on the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
And that often leads to inflation and shortages,
Yeah.
much like what we saw, on a smaller scale during the pandemic.
Oh, tell me about it. I still remember those empty grocery store shelves.
Right.
But this time it could be way worse.
Yeah, potentially.
Right? Like 7 ways specifically mentions wheat shortages.
Okay.
I mean, imagine the price of bread skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Or even just not being available.
That's a scary thought.
It is. It really makes you think about
Not a problem.
how reliant we are on, these global supply chains.
Yeah, how would you adjust your shopping?
Yeah,
If basic foods became scarce or ridiculously expensive?
that's a good question.
Yeah.
And that's where this kind of contrasting advice on food security comes in, right? Like
What?
7 ways they suggest stockpiling,
Okay.
like flour, rice beans, basically filling up those giant prepper buckets.
Yeah, the classic prepper move.
Yeah,
Which does offer that immediate safety net,
right.
You've got it there if you need it,
Uh-huh.
but it's not without its downsides.
Sure.
Storage space, shelf life.
Yeah.
And let's face it, eating the same things for months on end gets old.
Yeah, that's true.
But the same source also brings up victory gardens,
Oh, yeah.
which were huge during the World Wars.
Right.
It's a more sustainable long-term approach.
And it's interesting because the cost of food production, farm parts, packaging, fertilizer, all that stuff has been rising for a while now.
It has.
And a wartime economy could make gardening seem like a much better idea.
Absolutely. It's all about weighing those short-term needs
Right.
against building a solution that could last.
Yeah. And speaking of long-term solutions,
Okay.
let's talk gear.
All right. We've got Gear Up for Survival, which is, the classic prepper manual.
Mm-hmm.
And then even Essential Items to Pack for War, which is written for soldiers.
Oh, wow.
But there is some overlap there.
I bet.
Like when you look at the essentials, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Water, food, first aid, navigation tools,
Right.
hygiene items, communication devices,
Basics.
the basics.
Mm.
But it's interesting to think about how you adapt those basics for a civilian context.
Yeah, that's key.
Right.
Like, think about water filtration.
Mm-hmm.
Would you invest in a system if tap water became unreliable?
That's a good point.
And then communication.
Yeah.
Preparing for the unthinkable and the ultimate WW3 prepping checklist both talk about ham radios and satellite phones.
Right.
When regular networks are down.
So would you buy a ham radio?
Yeah, would you learn how to use one?
I don't even know where to start with that.
It's a whole thing.
It is. And then there's the whole question of shelter.
Okay.
Do you hunker down at home or
Try to get somewhere more remote.
tough choices?
Yeah, those are some big questions.
They are. And the answers are going to be different for everybody,
Of course.
depending on their individual circumstances,
Right.
their resources, their family situation.
Exactly. And then there's the big one.
Okay.
The thing nobody wants to think about, but we can't ignore.
Yeah.
Nuclear preparedness.
Uh-huh.
Our source, How to Prepare for Nuclear War. They don't hold back.
Yeah. I bet that's a pretty intense read.
It is. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But even in this scenario, knowledge is power.
Right.
Like, we need to understand the different types of nuclear emergencies, from power plant accidents to,
Yeah.
well, the use of weapons.
Right. The worst case scenario.
And there are practical things people can do.
Okay. Like what?
Understanding what fallout is and how it spreads.
Okay.
finding or creating safe shelter, and the principles of time, distance, and shielding.
So it's about mitigating risk
Yeah.
as much as possible, even in the face of something so terrifying.
Exactly. And this ties back to something we see in Gear Up for Survival and How to Survive a World War. The importance of mental preparedness.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about having the supplies, it's about staying calm and rational
Right.
when everything's going haywire.
Having coping strategies and stress management techniques.
Yeah, what works for you?
Right.
Exercise, meditation, connecting with loved ones.
Mhm.
Those things become even more crucial in a crisis.
Yeah, because it's not enough to just survive physically.
Right.
If you're falling apart mentally and emotionally.
What kind of life is that?
Exactly. And how to survive a world war. They really get this.
Yeah.
They say to build stress-reducing activities into your life now.
Okay.
Exercise, music, nature, creative stuff, whatever works for you.
Find those little bits of joy that keep you going even when things are dark.
Yeah, remembering that even in the worst situations, you still have choices
That's an important point.
in how you respond, how you treat others, how you hold on to hope.
And it's interesting how Gear Up for Survival also emphasizes the role of community.
Oh, yeah.
They talk about how strong support networks can provide resources, skills, and emotional support, all of which are vital during a crisis.
It really reinforces this idea that prepping isn't just about individual survival.
Right.
It's about collective resilience.
So we've got this potential economic chaos,
Yeah.
the need for food and supplies,
Yeah.
and then the mental and emotional fortitude to weather this storm. But how do we actually navigate the practicalities of self-defense and community building?
Right.
Especially when these ethical dilemmas come into play.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we'll delve into next.
I can't wait.
Buckle up.
Let's do it.
So we were just talking about how crucial community is, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to a topic that I think a lot of people find a little bit tricky.
Okay.
Self-defense,
Right.
Gear Up for Survival, is pretty upfront about it. They're saying that, look, when things break down, you might have to protect yourself and your family.
Yeah. And they even bring up firearms,
They do.
which is a pretty intense recommendation.
It's definitely not something that everyone's comfortable with.
Not at all.
And the source acknowledges that,
Okay.
they suggest alternatives like pepper spray and things like that.
Right.
But the point is, in a major crisis, the threats might go beyond
Yeah.
what we usually think of.
Like, that's a heavy thought.
It is.
How to prepare for war as a civilian also touches on this.
Oh, okay.
Like, you need to be aware of the potential dangers in your area.
Right.
Looting, civil unrest, it could get really bad.
And that's where having a strong community becomes even more important.
Yeah.
The ultimate WW3 prepping checklist even suggests creating a network of like-minded people,
Okay.
setting up communication and planning to help each other out.
So it's not just about being a lone wolf with your supplies.
No.
It's about banding together,
Right.
sharing knowledge and resources, safety in numbers, right?
Exactly. And that sense of community can also help to combat
Yeah.
the fear and isolation that often come with a crisis.
Right. How to prepare for and survive war as a civilian really stresses that lone wolves are much more vulnerable in a wartime situation.
Absolutely. You need those connections. You need that support.
And How to Survive a World War agrees. They say community can be a lifeline.
It makes sense.
It's not just about the practical help,
Right.
but also the emotional support and having that shared purpose.
It's about more than just surviving, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's about thriving in the face of adversity.
Which brings up another vital aspect, communication.
Oh, yeah. Big one.
If infrastructure breaks down, no more cell phones, no more internet.
So much for staying informed on Twitter.
Yeah, back to basics.
Several sources, including Preparing for the Unthinkable and that WW3 checklist, they highlight ham radio.
Oh, yeah.
It takes effort to learn, but it could be vital
Okay.
for coordinating with your community.
Right.
Or getting news from the outside world.
And let's not forget good old-fashioned word of mouth.
Right.
That civilian source emphasizes getting to know your neighbors now,
Yeah.
building those relationships so you have a plan that doesn't rely on tech.
It's about weaving a network of trust, going beyond your immediate circle. You never know who'll need help
Right.
or who might be able to offer it.
It really does take a village, or a well-prepped one in this case.
Exactly.
But even with the best community supplies and communication,
Yeah,
we can't forget about mental preparedness.
absolutely. Gear Up for Survival has a whole section on this.
Oh, really?
It's about having ways to cope with stress,
Okay.
learning to stay calm under pressure,
Right.
Even things like mindfulness or meditation,
Yeah.
finding peace amidst the chaos.
Because surviving physically isn't enough if you're falling apart mentally and emotionally.
Right. What kind of life is that?
Exactly.
How to survive a world war, they get this too.
Okay.
They say to build stress-reducing activities into your life now.
So, like, what kind of thing?
Exercise, music, nature, creative stuff, whatever works for you.
So it's about finding those little bits of joy and connection that keep you going, even when things are dark.
Yeah, remembering that even in the worst situations, you still have choices
Yeah.
in how you respond, how you treat others, and how you hold on to hope.
And preparing for the unthinkable adds another layer to this.
Okay.
They encourage readers to think about their values and create a code of conduct
Okay.
for themselves and their community.
So it's like asking yourself those tough questions now,
Right.
before you're in a situation where you have to make split-second decisions.
Because when you're in a crisis, there's no time for philosophical debates.
Right. You have to act.
And your actions are going to be based on the values you've already ingrained in yourself.
It's a powerful reminder that this isn't just about surviving.
Right.
It's about holding on to your humanity,
Yeah.
your hope, and choosing to do what's right, even when the world feels like it's falling apart.
Right. So we've got this foundation of physical and mental prep.
Yeah.
But there's another dimension that our sources keep bringing up,
Okay.
the ethical challenges of a wartime economy.
Right. Like, how do we grapple with those?
That's what we'll explore as we wrap up this deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
So we've talked about like the economic side of things, you know, getting your supplies and even fortifying your home.
Yeah.
But there's one more layer our sources keep coming back to,
Okay.
the ethical dilemmas
Yeah.
that could come up in this kind of situation.
It's something that How to Survive a World War really digs into.
Yeah.
They talk about the potential for moral compromise,
Right.
the tough choices people might face when resources are scarce and survival is on the line.
Yeah.
Imagine having to decide whether to share your food and water with strangers,
Right.
knowing it could put your own family at risk.
Like, that is a heart-wrenching scenario.
It is.
And they even bring up the idea that you might have to consider
Yeah.
things like looting, abandoned stores or homes if there's literally no other way to get what you need.
Yeah. You're in survival mode at that point.
It really makes you realize how a crisis could test our ethical boundaries in ways we never imagined.
Absolutely. And how to prepare for war as a civilian
Yeah.
goes even further with this.
Oh, really?
They suggest that you might need to be cautious,
Okay.
even around people you once considered friends or neighbors.
Wow.
They paint a picture of a world where trust is fragile
Right.
and where even seemingly good people might do desperate things out of fear.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought.
It is.
It brings home the point that preparing for a wartime economy isn't just about, you know, gathering stuff
Right.
and learning skills.
It's about more than that.
It's about preparing ourselves mentally and emotionally for the moral challenges
Exactly.
that could come with it.
It's interesting that the ultimate WW3 prepping checklist actually has a section on this.
Oh, wow.
They urge readers to really think about their values
Okay.
and develop a code of conduct for themselves and their community.
So it's like asking yourself those tough questions now
Right.
before you're in a situation where you have to make split-second decisions.
Exactly, because when you're in a crisis, there's no time for these philosophical debates.
You got to act.
You have to act. And your actions are going to be based on the values you've already ingrained in yourself.
It's a powerful reminder that this whole process is about so much more than just physical survival.
It's about preserving our humanity,
Yeah.
clinging to hope, and choosing to act in a way that aligns with our deepest values,
Yeah.
even when everything around us feels like it's falling apart.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a question
Okay.
that both how to survive a world war and preparing for the unthinkable really got me thinking about. In a world turned upside down, where the rules have changed, the comforts we take for granted are gone,
Yeah.
what values and principles would guide your actions?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is. Not just in the context of a potential war,
Right.
but even in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Because the choices we make, big and small, are what ultimately shape the world, both for ourselves and for future generations.
And on that note, we'll sign off.
All right.
Remember, power preparedness is key, but it's hope and compassion that will truly guide us through any storm.
Well said.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
Until next time.